My topic today, I'm going to call Option B. This is not my title, it's the title of a famous book written by Sheryl Sandberg. Now, for those of you who do not know, Sheryl Sandberg is the CFO of Facebook. She's a very, very powerful woman. She's a billionaire. She's Mark Zuckerberg's right-hand person. She's helped build Facebook, and she's very, very well known. And she wrote a book before 2015, maybe in the early 2000s, called Lean In. I thought it was a good book. I could identify being a working mother myself, but it actually got a lot of criticism because a big theme of her book is that women should lean in, and if they get opportunities at work, they should take them. And the criticism came because Sheryl Sandberg had it all. She was young, she was rich, she is beautiful. She had a wonderful Jewish husband, David Goldberg, two beautiful children. And the criticism was, well, it's easy for her to lean in. It's easy for her to work because she has a stay-at-home father. Well, he was in business. He was part of a startup. I think he was in Monkey Survey. And also they could afford whoever they wanted, a chef, a driver, a cleaner, a nanny. So there was a lot of criticism. Easy for you to say that when you have all the support, all this love around you, you've got this perfect life. Well, in 2015, her perfect life changed. She was on holiday in Mexico with her husband. He went to the gym, and while on the treadmill, he died of heart complications. He was 47 years old. So overnight, literally, or in minutes, her life changed completely. And the relevance of this is, it's a side track, is that no one ever has it perfect. And she was completely thrown by this and traumatized by this. And she then, with the help of a psychologist friend, wrote another book called Option B. And the theme of her second book is that you have option A in life. Her option was probably to grow old with David. And then along comes option B. David drops dead in Mexico, and she's a widow with two children. And her idea as she started healing was, if you've got option B, it's not what you want, but to use her language, she was going to kick the SH1T out of it. Now, that's a great sentiment. It's saying, I didn't really want this, but I'm going to give it my best. The other very good thing about her book is that she talks a lot about post-traumatic growth as opposed to post-traumatic stress. And it's true that there's a lot of stress, excuse the pun, on post-traumatic stress disorder. But really, it only afflicts 10% of the population. Most people who go through traumas, whether it's bushfires, floods, even losing people, actually experience what's called post-traumatic growth. And it's a pity that more of that isn't known. And therefore, her book really goes into that very thoroughly, what it is and how people are able to fall down. It's really what resilience is: fall down, and over time, pick yourself up and actually bounce back. And the word bounce means you can even go higher than you were before. And this is a very important concept to internalize. And another really good book on this theme is Lee Sales' book called An Ordinary Day, because Lee Sales also talks about your life is going along in a very normal way. You're having an ordinary day, and then something cataclysmic can happen. And Lee Sales, she is a journalist on a very famous current affairs show every evening on the ABC, the 7:30 Report. And she has interviewed hundreds of people who have gone through these kind of events. So she interviews them for her book. And she asks them all, how did you recover? And I think that 9 out of 10 all said they experienced post-traumatic growth. So one of the people she interviews is the man who lost his wife and two children at the Port Arthur massacre in 1997. and what he went through, and how 20 years later he has rebuilt his life. Doesn't mean he doesn't, of course, feel pain, but it didn't decimate him. At some point, he was able to move forward with his life. These are major events that happen to people. And so she also taps into this post-traumatic growth and the ability that we human beings have to bounce back and to be stronger. So I think that Sheryl Sandberg's book is fabulous and I recommend it. But having said that, there's a part of me that hasn't always been comfortable with it, because the kind of thinking that this is option B and not option A is not really a Torah idea. It's not really a Jewish idea. Because what we're saying, if there's option A and option B, is this is how life's meant to be. That's option A. And if it doesn't work out, then we've got option B, and we've got to work very hard. And there's always this little sort of holding in tight there, gritting our teeth, trying to make option B okay. And that actually isn't what the Torah view is. The Torah view isn't that we're meant to grit our teeth and resign ourselves to something we don't really want. In Ethics of the Fathers, it says, who is a rich man? And the answer is a man who is satisfied with his lot. And I'm using the word man, it's the way it's written in the old ways. I know it's not PC, to mean who's the human being. Could be any gender, it's just a generic term. So please forgive me for using an old-fashioned generic term. So who is the rich man? The man who is happy with his lot. And the Talmud actually looks at that and also did some market research and asked, in the Talmud, 3 people are asked. So one of them was this millionaire, or probably in our day a billionaire. They asked him, who is a rich man? And he said, a man who's got 1,000 fields, 10,000 slaves, mills filled with so many tons of wheat, that is a rich man. They then went to Rabbi Akiva and they asked Rabbi Akiva, who at the time they asked him was extremely poor, sleeping on straw, and he had a wife, Rachel, who believed in him and who encouraged him to go and learn Torah. He was an ignoramus, and after 24 years, he became the leading Torah scholar. But at this point, he only had Rachel, and when they asked him who is a wealthy man, he said a man who's got a wife like Rachel. The third person they asked was somebody who had a gastric complaint. Maybe today we talk about it as Crohn's or irritable bowel. This person was asked who is a wealthy person, and he said someone who's got a toilet nearby. Now, these answers are really significant because each one said they were rich. They all said that what they had made them a wealthy person. The rich man had the fields, had the slaves, had the wheat, and went, yes, I'm wealthy. Rabbi Akiva had Rachel, and he was grateful and felt, I'm wealthy. And the guy with Crohn's had his toilet, and he felt blessed. So that's what it's meant to be. It wasn't that the guy with Crohn's went, look, I've got a toilet nearby, and that's good, and I'm grateful, and I thank Hashem every day, but really, I really wish I had the fields and the slaves. He was saying, I've got everything I need. And that's what it means when we say who is a wealthy person. It's a person who feels they've got everything that they need. Now, if you go back and you go, well, I don't have option A, but I've got option B, then you're not really saying I've got everything that I need. You say, well, I'm making the best of it, and it's good. And as she says, I'm kicking the guts out of it. I'm doing what I can to make this work. Actually, on a deep Torah level, that's not the correct way of seeing it. From a Jewish point of view, whatever Hashem sends us is plan A. It is exactly what we're meant to be going through at that time, and it's good for us. Now, we might think it's plan B, and we might not want it. We might say we want the fields and the riches. We might say we want something else, and we think that's what is good for us. And Hashem is saying, no, you can't have it. So to internalize that what Hashem wants for us is what we should want for ourselves is a very important principle. That if we think we know what's good for us and what we should be having, that's a very high form of arrogance. And it comes from pleasure seeking. Because we want, if you ask what people want, everyone's asking for riches and the perfect spouse and children who give us nachas and who are successful and the house with the picket fence. It's all about comfort and pleasure and status. Those are all the things we want. Now, the reality is that life does not work like that. And what Sheryl Sandberg had, and I'm glad she had, and I don't wish her any harm, and I'm not criticizing her as an individual. What she had was a dream life. But unfortunately, what happened for her, which happens to all of us to different degrees, is that sooner or later Hashem sends you a test. Now, what we are going through now, the coronavirus pandemic, is a good example of that. Our lives were going along. We were having, as Lee Sales would say, an ordinary day. Whatever you were doing in February or March, things were going along really as usual. We thought that was normal. And maybe that was our plan A. Our plan A was we're in this corporate job and we're building ourselves up, or we're becoming a pilot and we're going to be the best pilot we can be, or we've opened a brand new restaurant and we're going to, really kill it at Circular Quay, whatever we thought we were going to do. And suddenly along comes Hashem with something that no one could plan for, something bigger than all of us, that all our science and technology couldn't cure in a minute. And our lives were turned upside down, and things that we took for granted suddenly not happening anymore. I'll give you two simple examples. They're very similar actually, but I run groups, and one of my groups, everybody in that group have adult children who live in Israel. And everybody in that group, without fail, were flying to Israel for Pesach this year, and to see their children and, of course, their grandchildren. It's a much awaited and looked forward, planned for trip. Gone. Plan A was going to Israel to be with the kids. Plan B was there's no international flights. More than that, everybody is going to be in lockdown or socially isolating. On a smaller scale, people who were in the hospitality industry or in travel, or people where travel was so much part of their lives and always thought it would be like that, gone. And we don't know when it's going to be reinstated and if it'll ever be reinstated in the same way. I must say, I personally have always loved going on cruises, but don't know. I'm going to be thinking about it very carefully now. I hear the word cruise being a petri dish again. Each time I hear it, it's changed the way that I see things. So we're going to change. We're going to come out of this differently. But plan A might have been that every year I wanted to go on a cruise. Now I've got plan B, which means don't go near a cruise. So this is actually life. And it's not about being shocked and going, oh, this shouldn't be happening and this is terrible. It's more about going, life is constantly changing. And as humans, we need to constantly adapt. A lot of people misunderstood, not that I am an evolutionist, but Darwin, people think it's survival of the fittest, but actually it's about the adaptation of the species. It's one thing I'm happy to quote from Darwin, the ability to adapt. So we need to know that the way the world is constructed, that in his wisdom, Hashem has created a world where we are not going to have comfort all the time. We are very lucky when we have comfort, we should enjoy it. But we're also lucky when we don't have comfort because there are always benefits that come out of it. And they're both equal. One isn't better than the other. We need to get out of our minds that plan A is good and plan B is second fiddle. In our minds, there's a plan A and plan B. But in fact, from the Torah point of view, in terms of our souls, there's only one plan. It's that Hashem sends our soul down into this world, into our particular body, into our particular family, with our particular brains and our particular looks and our particular bank balance and all the things that we have, and we have got a job to do. And in order for us to grow and develop, Hashem sends us tests. Now, sometimes it's a global test. We're all going through it. But even as we're all going through it, we're all going through it differently. Because of our differences, some people are actually flourishing. Zoom is flourishing. They've never been busier. Qantas is struggling and needs a government bailout. So we're all going through the pandemic, but the way we experience it is different. But then we also have individual challenges. So if you're an absolute extrovert and you love being around people and suddenly you're isolated at home with one person, that can be a really big struggle. But if you don't love socializing that much, you might be loving the quarantine. And in fact, I've had a few people who've said to me, what's wrong with me? I'm actually loving not having to go out and run around, just loving being at home with my family. So on that level, we're all different. So if you think about it, a lot that we learn from are the stories in the Torah. And one of the main proponents of the Torah, my protagonist, is Avraham Avinu, Abraham. And we say that Abraham went through 10 tests. Most people know the final test, which was he was asked to go and slaughter his son Isaac, which didn't happen in the end, but he got up early in the morning to fulfill that request. But there were lots of tests along the way. He was thrown into a fiery furnace. He nearly drowned in a river. He fought various wars. They went down to Egypt in a famine. Sarah was abducted by the king. There were lots of things that happened to him. He didn't have a simple life. None of our forefathers or foremothers had easy lives. And the question is asked, why did Abraham have those tests? Surely God knew who Abraham was. And one of the answers is, yes, God knows who we are. But when he put Abraham through those tests, Abraham discovered who Abraham was. So we have the opportunity now to discover who we are. We've got this test, and we have the opportunity to think about, are we adaptable? Can we see this as plan A, that this is good for us, and see all the good that can come out of it, all the parts of ourselves that we can develop? Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. It's a bit like physical fitness. For some of us, physical fitness is not so easy. I know some people just love it and run in the morning at 5 a.m. And for other people, it's more of a struggle. But for anyone preparing for a marathon, it's always tough. You've got to put in a lot of training. You've got to put in a lot of hours. You've got to push yourself. It's really a lot of sweat and hard work. And that is a metaphor for life, for success, is there's always sweat and hard work. We can chug along a while, and then Hashem sends us a marathon, and we have to push. So we're in that phase now of actually pushing through, making us able to cope with this marathon. Now, what does that mean? It means that emotionally, we are resilient and we are able to still behave in an elevated way. Now, one of the things that acceptance and commitment therapy is based on is this idea that pursuing happiness is a trap, and that what we rather want to pursue is a rich and fulfilling life. We can't always avoid pain. And in fact, what I'm saying, given Abraham and all the stories I've been mentioning to you, it seems like no one avoids pain. So the question is, how do we live with our pain? How do we not pretend it's there, but not let us become devastated, destroyed, unable to function? The idea is to still function and to live in accordance with our values, even if we have pain. So I'll give you an example. When you think about a value that you want to live by, then when you have a feeling, you can reach what's called a choice point. So let's say, for example, a value is that you're going to be brave for your children. So your kids come and they say, what's going on? We're very scared. And you're also very scared. But you want to be a role model of somebody who can cope with a crisis. So although you're trembling, You will put on a brave face and you will role model for your kids. Life goes on. We still get up in the morning. We still eat breakfast. We still have faith. We still do good things. We're not going to lie in bed and give up. That trembling is still there. But our arms and our legs and our body and our head and our speech, all of that acts in accordance with our value, which is to be protective to our kids or to be loving to our kids. We all do this. If you have a job, you all know there are days where perhaps you're feeling sad, you've had a fight with your spouse, or perhaps you've got a financial worry. But when you go to work, you have to put on your professional hat and you act professional. Inside, there's still the little worry, but you're moving and you're doing what you have to do because your higher value is to be professional. Or maybe your value is to earn a salary to keep your family fed. Whatever your value is, at the choice of, do I let this feeling take over? Do I give up? Do I succumb to these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings and sensations? Or can I just acknowledge that they're there, make space for them, but still move ahead with my life? And that's an incredible metaphor for how we need to live. We need to validate our feelings. We need to allow ourselves to feel whatever we're feeling, but not to become a victim to them. You know, often people say, I can't help it. You know, I was born anxious. I've got a short fuse. My stress make me do that. Anybody who's lost their job would kick someone in the face. It's not true. It's not true. We are not victims to our feelings, to our memories, to our sensations. They are there. But what we do about them is our choice. At every moment, we have a choice to move forward with dignity, to move forward in alignment with our values, or to be hooked by them and for them really to bully us, for them to take over and stop us from living in alignment with our values. So if you have an area that you're struggling with, just take a minute and think about what is your highest value. For example, if you're finding being cooped up at home, you're very irritable and snappy with your children, then just take a minute and think about what are your highest values with your children. And I'm pretty sure it's things like being kind, being loving, being considerate, building their self-esteem. These are all common things that loving parents want to do. So when you feel irritable, you have a choice. You can just snap at them or criticize them or be nasty. And then you are the victim to your irritability. Or you can acknowledge, I'm feeling irritable, but I'm just going to make space for that. I can see it's there. But even though the feeling's there, and you can see where in your body is that feeling, I can still move my arms and legs. I can turn my head. I can still function. I'm going to talk in a loving way. The irritability is there, but I'm bigger than the irritability. I'm bigger than my feelings and sensations. So there are times, maybe in therapy, where you want to look at those thoughts and feelings and sensations and memories and work on them. But most of the time, it's about learning to function with discomfort, but not that you're being swamped, not that you, as I said, you're resigned and you're not enjoying it. It's part of the human condition. It's part of the human condition to keep going. You know, sometimes we're a little bit hungry, but it's no time to eat, and we keep going. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but a few hours later we go, actually, that wasn't so bad. So think about what your values are. Think about what it is that you want to achieve at home. A lot of people talk about Shalom Bayit to me. It's about peace in the home. It's about creating a loving environment. It's about self-care. Self-care is a very important one. Are you taking time out, even if it's half an hour on your bed, so that you can also look after yourself? Or if you stay up all night, is that really good for you? Every minute of the day, you have choice of where you're going to go, which is the direction that you're going to go. Obviously, I'm just talking about this in a very overall way. One has to sometimes work through it in a deep way if there's something that you keep repeating. Like if you keep getting angry with someone in your family, sometimes you actually have to work with someone to actually move past that. But even working with someone, a therapist, means that your value to solve that, your value to live a more elevated life is going to be fulfilled. So to summarize, there is no option B. There's only one option, and it's a good option. Hashem has sent you a life story full of challenges. He's also sent the world a life story full of challenges, and the two intersect. We're all part of the world, and we're all individual. And those challenges aren't bad, and they're not a punishment, and they're not to destroy us. Those challenges are to help us grow, for us to identify our strengths as human beings. And human beings have a godly soul. And we feel so much better when we behave in an elevated way. And an elevated way means that we act in alignment with our values. So no matter what you're going through now, and I hope it's nothing too terrible, but whether it's a job loss or whether it's living in limited space or whether it's uncertainty, these are everyday problems that you do have to deal with. And problem solving is important. But at all times, when you make a decision of how to problem solve, keep your value system in mind. Do you want to go down a ruthless path, or do you want to go around a considerate path? How do you want to be in the world? And when you act in alignment with your values, no matter what is going on outside, you can feel fulfilled. You can feel that your life is rich and blessed and fulfilled because you're actually in tune with your inner self. And if you ever feel that your feelings are getting the better of you, then just take a moment to step back and observe your feelings and be aware that there's a part of you that can observe your feelings. They're not the whole of you. And there will always be a point at which you are bigger than your feelings and you can make space for them and sit with them. And you don't have to try and get rid of them. And sometimes they'll move and sometimes they won't. But give up the idea of a happiness trap. Give up the idea that you've got to be happy and we've got to have option A. Life isn't like that. And there's so many lessons one can learn from this pandemic. And one of them is that you can be having an ordinary day and Hashem can turn the world upside down. Nothing is certain. But what we can always choose, even though life is uncertain, is how we behave. And the way we choose that is being guided by our deepest values. So I wish everybody strength during this time and to really focus on personal growth. I know Scott Morrison keeps talking about coming out on the other side. We want to come out on the other side stronger and better and more resilient. We want to come out, I'm not saying we have post-traumatic stress, but with post-traumatic growth. We want to come out having grown. And then we will see that everything we've gone through has actually been for the good. Thank you.